Have you ever found yourself in a situation where your actions just didn't quite line up with what you truly believed? Maybe you publicly supported a cause you secretly doubted, or you stuck with a decision even after evidence clearly showed it was wrong. We all experience these internal wrestling matches, moments when our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors seem to be pulling in different directions. It's perplexing, sometimes even unsettling, and it points to a fascinating truth. Much of what drives us operates beneath the surface, hidden from our conscious awareness. Our minds are incredibly complex landscapes, filled with intricate pathways and surprising shortcuts that profoundly influence every choice we make, every interaction we have, and ultimately, who we become. Yet, for many of us, these fundamental psychological forces remain largely a mystery, leaving us feeling like passengers in our own lives rather than the navigators. We react to circumstances, get caught in emotional currents, and wonder why certain patterns keep repeating, often without grasping the deeper psychological machinery at play. But what if you could pull back the curtain and peek into the inner workings of your own mind and the minds of others? What if you could gain access to insights that explain not just what people do, but why they do it? Imagine understanding the subtle biases that shape your perceptions, the hidden motivations behind your decisions, and the unconscious influences that sway your emotions. This isn't about learning complex academic theories. It's about unlocking practical, actionable wisdom that can transform your daily experience. It's about recognizing the psychological traps that can lead to misjudgment, improving your communication, strengthening your relationships, and making more empowered choices. This knowledge isn't just power, it's a key to profound self-understanding and a more authentic, fulfilling life. It offers a fresh lens through which to view your past actions, interpret present challenges, and proactively shape your future. In this journey, we're going to dive deep into 12 profound insights into human behavior. These aren't just interesting facts. They are foundational truths that, once grasped, will revolutionize how you see yourself and the world around you. We'll explore why you sometimes resist change even when it's clearly beneficial, why you might misjudge others so easily, and why your memory can play tricks on you. We'll uncover the subtle forces that influence your decisions as a consumer, a friend, a colleague, and even in your most intimate relationships. By the end of our time together, you won't just have a collection of new ideas. You'll possess a new framework for understanding, a deeper empathy for yourself and others, and practical tools to navigate life with greater intention and wisdom. This is an invitation to embark on a journey of profound personal discovery, to unlock the hidden mechanisms of your own mind, and to finally become the conscious architect of your own blossoming. Get ready to transform your perception, one powerful insight at a time. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where you held two completely opposing beliefs, or your actions contradicted your values, yet somehow you rationalized it away? Perhaps you convinced yourself that an unhealthy habit wasn't that bad, or you defended a viewpoint fiercely despite having private doubts. It's a common human experience, one that often leaves us feeling a subtle unease, a flicker of discomfort in the background of our minds. This unsettling feeling arises when our mental landscape becomes a battlefield where conflicting ideas or actions clash, and our brains, in their infinite wisdom, are hardwired to seek harmony, to resolve that internal conflict at almost any cost. This often leads to fascinating and sometimes illogical shifts in our perceptions and behaviors. This internal tug of war, this profound psychological discomfort, is known as cognitive dissonance. It's a powerful psychological phenomenon that describes the mental stress or discomfort experienced by an individual who holds contradictory beliefs, ideas, or values, or is confronted by new information that conflicts with existing beliefs, ideas, or values. Leon Festinger, a pioneering social psychologist, first proposed this theory in the 1950s, suggesting that we are all driven by an innate need for cognitive consistency. When inconsistency arises, our minds kick into high gear to reduce this dissonance, often leading to changes in our attitudes, beliefs, or behaviors, frequently in ways we don't consciously recognize. The mechanism behind cognitive dissonance is rooted in our brain's fundamental desire for order and predictability. Imagine your beliefs and actions as interconnected gears in a machine. When all the gears mesh smoothly, the machine runs efficiently, and you feel comfortable and secure in your understanding of the world. But when a new belief or action grinds against an existing one, creating friction, the brain signals distress. This distress, the dissonance, acts as a powerful motivator. To alleviate it, the brain employs various strategies. One common method is changing one of the conflicting cognitions, either the belief or the behavior. For instance, if you believe in healthy eating, but find yourself constantly indulging in fast food, you might change your behavior. Eat healthier or change your belief. Convince yourself that fast food isn't that unhealthy, or that you deserve it. Another strategy is to add new cognitions that bridge the gap, essentially finding reasons or justifications that make the conflicting elements seem less contradictory. You might tell yourself that fast food is convenient and saves time, thus justifying the unhealthy choice. A third, more complex strategy involves trivializing the dissonant cognitions, reducing their importance. You might decide that eating healthy isn't as important as other life goals. Our brains are incredibly adept at finding the path of least resistance to restore internal peace, even if that path involves self-deception or a distortion of reality. The consequences of cognitive dissonance are far-reaching and impact every aspect of our lives. On a personal level, it can lead to self-justification, where we become incredibly skilled at defending our past actions, even when they were clearly suboptimal. This can prevent us from learning from mistakes, as admitting an error would create dissonance. In relationships, it can explain why people stay in unhealthy situations, rationalizing the flaws of a partner or the difficulties of a job to reduce the dissonance between their desire for happiness and their current reality. Marketers exploit cognitive dissonance by creating situations where people commit to a small action, then feel compelled to follow through with larger, more expensive ones to justify their initial commitment. Think of foot-in-the-door techniques. Political campaigns use it to solidify voter loyalty, presenting information that confirms existing biases and creates dissonance for those who might consider switching allegiances. When people invest heavily in something, whether financially or emotionally, they often feel a stronger need to believe it was a good decision, even if evidence suggests otherwise. This can manifest in everything from defending a bad car purchase to staying in a failing business venture. To apply this insight and protect yourself, first, cultivate self-awareness. When you feel that subtle internal discomfort, that gnawing sense that something isn't quite right, pause and ask yourself, Am I experiencing cognitive dissonance? Identify the conflicting beliefs or actions. Once identified, consciously resist the urge to immediately rationalize or justify. Instead, engage in critical thinking and intellectual honesty. Actively seek out information that challenges your existing beliefs, rather than just reinforcing them. This is difficult because our natural inclination is to avoid dissonance, but it's crucial for growth. Practice radical acceptance of reality, even when it's uncomfortable. If you've made a mistake, acknowledge it. This creates temporary dissonance, but by consciously choosing to adjust your beliefs or actions based on new evidence, you move towards genuine growth, rather than entrenched self-deception. Consider the example of buyer's remorse after a big purchase. You might feel dissonance. Instead of just justifying it, you could critically evaluate if it was the right choice and learn for future decisions. The profound takeaway from understanding cognitive dissonance is that your mind is constantly striving for internal consistency, and this drive can sometimes lead you astray from objective reality or genuine self-improvement. By becoming aware of this powerful psychological force, you gain the ability to question your own rationalizations, challenge your deeply held biases, and make choices that are truly aligned with your values, rather than just serving to reduce discomfort. It's about developing the courage to sit with uncomfortable truths, to embrace the dissonance as a signal for growth, and to consciously choose clarity and integrity over the easy path of self-deception. This insight empowers you to become a more discerning thinker, a more honest individual, and ultimately, a more adaptable and evolved human being. Have you ever seen someone make a really careless mistake, or act in a way that seemed completely irrational, and immediately thought to yourself, "Wow, they must be so irresponsible"? Or, "That's just the kind of person they are"? Conversely, when you make a mistake, do you tend to explain it away by blaming external factors like a bad day, lack of sleep, or unforeseen circumstances? It's a subtle but pervasive double standard in how we interpret behavior, our own versus everyone else's. We're quick to attribute others' actions to their inherent character, while conveniently excusing our own errors as products of the situation. This common mental shortcut can lead to profound misunderstandings, unnecessary judgments, and strained relationships, building walls where bridges could be. This ubiquitous cognitive bias is called the fundamental attribution error, FAE. It describes our tendency to overemphasize personality-based explanations for other people's observed behaviors, while underemphasizing the role and power of situational influences. At the same time, when explaining our own behavior, especially our failures or mistakes, we tend to do the opposite. We attribute them to external, situational factors rather than internal, personal ones. It's as if we have one set of rules for judging others and another, far more lenient, set for ourselves. This concept was first articulated by social psychologist Lee Ross, building on earlier work by Edward E. Jones and Victor Harris. The mechanism behind the FAE is rooted in how our brains process information and the perspectives we have. When we observe someone else, their actions are typically the most salient piece of information. We don't have direct access to their thoughts, feelings, or the intricate details of their current situation. It's like watching a play where you only see the actors on stage, not the complex backstage machinery, the director's instructions, or the props that might be influencing their performance. Our brains, seeking efficiency, often jump to the easiest explanation. That's just who they are. This is also partly due to the actor-observer bias, a related concept where we as actors have more information about our own situational influences, while observers only see our behavior. For example, if someone cuts you off in traffic, your immediate thought might be, "What an aggressive driver." Internal attribution. You don't consider that they might be rushing to an emergency or didn't see you. Situational attribution. Conversely, if you cut someone off, you immediately know your reasons. Perhaps you were distracted, running late, or didn't notice them, and you attribute your action to those external factors. This difference in informational access creates a systematic bias in how we attribute causes. The consequences of the fundamental attribution error are significant and touch almost every aspect of human interaction. In the workplace, it can lead to unfair performance reviews, where a manager attributes an employee's missed deadline to lack of motivation rather than considering an overwhelming workload or personal crisis. In relationships, it can cause arguments and resentment. A partner might attribute a forgotten anniversary to carelessness rather than an incredibly stressful week. In a broader societal context, the FAE contributes to prejudice and stereotyping. We might attribute poverty to laziness rather than systemic economic inequalities, or criminal behavior to bad character, without considering socioeconomic disadvantage or lack of opportunity. This bias reduces our empathy and our ability to find constructive solutions because we're misdiagnosing the root causes of behavior. It also hinders our personal growth, as we fail to take responsibility for our own character flaws if we constantly externalize our mistakes. To apply this profound insight and counteract the fundamental attribution error, the most crucial step is to practice situational awareness and empathy. Before jumping to conclusions about someone's character based on their behavior, pause and consciously consider what situational factors might be influencing their actions. Ask yourself, if I were in their shoes, facing their circumstances, how might I behave? This mental exercise forces you to shift your perspective from an internal attribution to a more balanced external one. For example, if a colleague seems uncooperative, instead of labeling them difficult, consider if they are under immense pressure, dealing with personal issues, or simply misunderstood the request. Second, apply the same rigorous self-reflection to your own behavior. When you make a mistake, don't immediately default to external excuses. Ask, what role did my own choices, attitudes, or internal state play in this outcome? This self-awareness fosters accountability and opens the door for genuine self-improvement. Third, seek out more information. Don't just observe, engage. Ask questions, listen actively, and gather context before forming judgments about others. This practice helps fill in the informational gaps that often lead to the FAE. The powerful takeaway from understanding the fundamental attribution error is that human behavior is rarely as simple as it appears. It's a complex interplay of internal traits and external circumstances. By recognizing our inherent bias to oversimplify and judge others internally, while excusing ourselves externally, we gain the capacity for greater empathy, more accurate understanding, and stronger, more compassionate relationships. This insight allows us to move beyond superficial judgments to a more nuanced and truthful appreciation of the intricate tapestry of human actions, paving the way for more effective problem-solving and a more connected world. Have you ever found yourself scrolling through social media, seeing articles or posts that perfectly confirm what you already believe, and feeling a surge of validation? Conversely, Have you noticed how easily you might dismiss information that contradicts your views, perhaps labeling it fake news or biased? It's a natural human inclination to gravitate towards information that aligns with our existing beliefs, creating a cozy mental echo chamber where our perspectives are constantly reinforced. While comforting, this tendency can significantly narrow our understanding of the world, blind us to alternative viewpoints, and even harden our resolve in the face of compelling counter-evidence. This powerful and pervasive cognitive bias is known as confirmation bias. It describes our unconscious tendency to search for, interpret, favor, and recall information in a way that confirms or supports our prior beliefs or values. Essentially, we selectively pay attention to information that fits our worldview and ignore or downplay information that doesn't. This isn't a deliberate act of deception. Rather, it's an automatic mental shortcut our brains employ to reduce cognitive effort and maintain a sense of consistency and certainty. It's a fundamental part of how we process information, shaping everything from our personal opinions to societal narratives. The mechanism behind confirmation bias is multifaceted. One aspect is selective exposure, where we actively seek out sources that align with our views. If you believe a certain political ideology, you're more likely to follow news channels and social media accounts that cater to that ideology. Another aspect is selective interpretation, meaning we interpret ambiguous information in a way that supports our existing beliefs. If you're convinced a new policy is bad, any neutral data point might be interpreted as evidence of its negative impact. Then there's selective memory, where we more readily recall information that confirms our beliefs and tend to forget or downplay contradictory evidence. Our brains are efficient pattern matchers, and reinforcing existing patterns requires less energy than breaking them down or building new ones. This also ties into our need for cognitive consistency. As discussed with cognitive dissonance, it's easier to maintain a stable worldview by confirming what we already know, rather than constantly reevaluating. The consequences of confirmation bias are profound and extend far beyond individual perceptions. In personal relationships, it can lead to misunderstandings and entrenched conflicts. If you already believe your partner is unsupportive, you'll notice every instance that confirms this and overlook acts of support. In the workplace, it can stifle innovation and lead to poor decision-making. A manager convinced their initial strategy is best might ignore data that suggests otherwise. Or a hiring committee might unconsciously favor candidates who remind them of successful people they already know. In science, it can impede discovery if researchers only look for data that supports their hypothesis. Perhaps most significantly, in the digital age, confirmation bias is amplified by algorithms that feed us more of what we already like, creating insulated filter bubbles and echo chambers that fragment society and make constructive dialogue incredibly challenging. It fuels polarization, making it difficult for people with differing views to even engage with each other's arguments, let alone find common ground. To counteract the pervasive influence of confirmation bias and truly expand your self-understanding, conscious effort is required. First, practice active open-mindedness. This means deliberately seeking out diverse perspectives, even those you anticipate disagreeing with. Read news from multiple sources across the political spectrum. Engage in respectful dialogue with people who hold different opinions, and explore arguments that challenge your deeply held beliefs. Second, adopt a falsification mindset. Instead of looking for information that confirms your belief, actively try to find information that would disprove it. This is a scientific approach that pushes you to critically evaluate your assumptions. For example, if you believe a certain stock will perform well, research reasons why it might fail instead of just reasons why it will succeed. Third, cultivate intellectual humility. Acknowledge that your current understanding is incomplete and that you might be wrong. Be comfortable with uncertainty and the possibility of revising your views. Finally, engage in Socratic questioning of your own thoughts. Why do I believe this? What evidence would change my mind? What assumptions am I making? The powerful takeaway from recognizing confirmation bias is that true understanding and wisdom don't come from simply accumulating facts that fit neatly into your existing worldview. Instead, they emerge from the courageous willingness to challenge your own assumptions, to actively seek out disconfirming evidence, and to embrace the discomfort of intellectual growth. By consciously stepping outside your mental echo chamber, you unlock a richer, more nuanced perception of reality, foster greater empathy for others, and cultivate a mind that is truly open to learning and evolving. This insight empowers you to break free from self-imposed limitations and become a more discerning, adaptable, and genuinely enlightened individual. Have you ever walked into a room convinced that everyone was staring at that tiny stain on your shirt, or remembered a minor social blunder from last week and cringed, assuming others were still dissecting it? It's a common experience. This feeling that the spotlight is constantly on us, illuminating our every flaw and misstep for the world to see. We agonize over minor imperfections, second-guess our actions, and often restrain ourselves from truly being authentic, all driven by the powerful but often mistaken belief that we are under intense scrutiny. Yet, more often than not, the reality is far less dramatic than our minds construct. This pervasive psychological phenomenon is known as the spotlight effect. It's the tendency we have to overestimate the extent to which our actions and appearance are noticed and evaluated by others. We feel as though we're constantly in the center of a brightly lit stage, with everyone in the audience keenly observing our every move. The truth, however, is that most people are far too preoccupied with their own internal spotlights to pay much attention to ours. They are the protagonists of their own narratives, just as we are of ours. This bias was famously demonstrated by psychologists Thomas Gilovich, Victoria Medvesh, and Kenneth Savitsky, who showed that participants vastly overestimated how many observers noticed a specific, embarrassing t-shirt they were asked to wear. The mechanism behind the spotlight effect is rooted in our inherent egocentrism. Our internal experience is, by definition, centered on ourselves. We are constantly aware of our thoughts, feelings, and sensations. This creates a natural tendency to project our internal state onto others, assuming they are as focused on us as we are on ourselves. It's a form of what's called anchoring and adjustment, where we anchor on our own internal experience, intense self-awareness, and then fail to adequately adjust for the fact that others have their own internal experiences. We have privileged access to our own inner world, while others do not. When we trip, we feel the embarrassment acutely. We don't realize that most bystanders might have just registered a momentary stumble and then moved on with their thoughts about their grocery list or their upcoming meeting. Furthermore, we tend to replay our own perceived social blunders, solidifying them in our memory, while others likely processed them briefly and then forgot. The consequences of the spotlight effect can be quite limiting and often lead to unnecessary anxiety and self-consciousness. It can make us overly cautious, preventing us from taking risks or trying new things for fear of judgment. We might hesitate to speak up in meetings, express an unconventional opinion, or wear something outside our usual style, all because we assume others will scrutinize and critique us. This can stifle creativity, limit personal growth, and make us less authentic in our interactions. It can also lead to a constant sense of pressure and social anxiety, as we spend mental energy managing an audience that isn't really there. Paradoxically, this intense self-focus can also make us less attuned to the actual needs and perspectives of others, as we're too wrapped up in our own perceived performance. To apply this insight and liberate yourself from the overbearing weight of the invisible spotlight, the first step is to simply acknowledge and remind yourself of the bias. When you feel that surge of self-consciousness, consciously tell yourself, "This is the spotlight effect at play. People are not paying as much attention as I think." Second, practice perspective taking. Shift your focus outwards. Instead of wondering what others are thinking about you, try to genuinely consider what they might be preoccupied with. Remember that everyone is the main character in their own story. This helps diminish your egocentric focus. Third, test your assumptions. If you're really worried, consider a small, low-stakes experiment. Wear something slightly unconventional and observe how few people genuinely react. You'll likely find that most people are indifferent. Finally, cultivate self-compassion. Understand that it's natural to feel self-conscious, but don't let that feeling dictate your actions. Embrace vulnerability and recognize that minor imperfections are part of being human and are rarely as noticeable or important to others as they are to you. The powerful takeaway from understanding the spotlight effect is that much of the anxiety and self-doubt we experience stems from an illusion, the mistaken belief that we are constantly under intense scrutiny. By recognizing that others are primarily focused on their own lives and concerns, we gain an incredible sense of freedom. This insight empowers us to let go of unnecessary self-consciousness, embrace authenticity, and live more boldly and genuinely. It allows us to redirect mental energy from worrying about external judgment to focusing on our own values, goals, and connections with others, truly fostering a journey of personal blossoming. Have you ever walked into a store and seen an item initially priced at an incredibly high amount, only to then find it discounted to what still seems like a considerable sum? Yet suddenly, it feels like a reasonable deal. Or perhaps you've been negotiating and the first number thrown out, no matter how outrageous, seemed to set the stage for all subsequent discussions. It's a subtle but powerful phenomenon where an initial piece of information, even if irrelevant, latches onto our minds and disproportionately influences our subsequent judgments and decisions. Our brains, seeking shortcuts, often cling to this first number or idea, using it as a mental starting point for evaluation, often without realizing how much it sways our perception of value or possibility. This cognitive bias is known as the anchoring bias. It's our common human tendency to rely too heavily on the first piece of information offered the anchor when making decisions. Once an anchor is set, subsequent judgments are made by adjusting away from that anchor, and these adjustments are typically insufficient. Even if the anchor is completely arbitrary or obviously irrelevant, it still exerts a strong pull on our perception. This powerful effect was extensively studied by psychologists Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky, whose groundbreaking work on heuristics and biases revealed how susceptible our decision-making processes are to these mental shortcuts. The mechanism behind anchoring bias is fascinating and rooted in how our brains process numerical and propositional information. When presented with an initial piece of information, our minds tend to use it as a reference point, a cognitive anchor. Even if we consciously try to disregard it, that anchor subtly influences our mental calculations. One explanation is that the anchor makes relevant information more accessible. For instance, if you hear a high price, your mind starts thinking about reasons why something might be expensive, making those attributes more prominent in your evaluation. Another theory suggests that we're simply not very good at making adjustments once an anchor is set. We adjust, but not enough. So our final estimate remains biased towards the initial anchor. Imagine a ship dropping anchor. It can still move, but only within a limited radius around that fixed point. Our judgments behave similarly, constrained by the initial anchor. The consequences of anchoring bias are widespread and can significantly impact our financial well-being, negotiations, and even self-perception. In sales, this is a common tactic. Presenting a high initial price makes a slightly lower, but still expensive, price seem like a bargain. During salary negotiations, the first offer made often sets the range for the entire discussion, regardless of actual market value. If a seller starts with a ridiculously high asking price for a car, even a significantly lower counteroffer from you might still be higher than what the car is truly worth, simply because your perception has been anchored by that initial number. In daily life, even something as simple as the suggested tip percentages on a bill can act as an anchor, subtly nudging you to tip more than you might have otherwise. It influences how we perceive statistics, how we evaluate risks, and even how we judge our own abilities if someone initially sets a high or low expectation. To leverage this insight and defend yourself against the subtle power of anchoring, the first step is conscious awareness. Recognize that any initial number or piece of information you encounter might be an anchor. Don't let it be the sole determinant of your value perception. Second, cultivate independent research and objective valuation. Before entering a negotiation or making a purchase, do your homework to establish an informed estimate of true value. For instance, if buying a car, research average prices for similar models before seeing the dealer's sticker price. This predetermined value acts as your own internal anchor, giving you a strong reference point. Third, in negotiations, be wary of setting an anchor too low if you are the seller, or too high if you are the buyer. If you are making the first offer, make it a well-researched, confident one that benefits you, rather than letting the other party dictate the starting point. Finally, practice mental counter-anchoring. If someone throws out an extreme anchor, consciously consider the opposite extreme or a more reasonable midpoint to break their anchor's hold on your thinking. The powerful takeaway from understanding anchoring bias is that your mind is incredibly susceptible to the first piece of information it receives, even when that information is irrelevant. By becoming aware of this powerful psychological shortcut, you gain a critical advantage in negotiations, decision-making, and assessing value. This insight empowers you to approach situations with a more informed and less biased perspective, allowing you to make choices that are truly in your best interest, rather than being subtly manipulated by arbitrary starting points. It's about taking control of your cognitive processes and ensuring your decisions are grounded in objective reality, not just initial impressions. Imagine you're holding a winning lottery ticket. You've just won a significant sum of money. Now, imagine you've lost the same significant sum of money. Which scenario evokes a stronger emotional response? For most people, the pain of losing feels far more intense, more visceral than the joy of an equivalent gain. It's a strange asymmetry in our psychology. The emotional sting of a setback often outweighs the thrill of a triumph of equal magnitude. This fundamental difference in how we perceive gains versus losses profoundly influences our decisions, our willingness to take risks, and our overall sense of well-being. This powerful psychological principle is known as loss aversion. It describes our innate tendency to prefer avoiding losses over acquiring equivalent gains. Put simply, the discomfort of losing something is psychologically more powerful than the pleasure of gaining something of equal value. This concept is a cornerstone of prospect theory, developed by Nobel laureates Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky. They found that people evaluate outcomes not in terms of absolute wealth, but in terms of gains and losses relative to a reference point, and that the value function for losses is steeper than for gains. This means a loss of $100 feels worse than a gain of $100 feels good. The mechanism behind loss aversion is deeply wired into our evolutionary psychology and brain chemistry. From an evolutionary perspective, avoiding threats and preserving what we have was often more critical for survival than pursuing new opportunities. Our brains are highly attuned to potential dangers and losses. Neuroscientifically, studies suggest that the brain's response to potential losses involves stronger activation in areas associated with negative emotions and threat processing, such as the amygdala. The fear of missing out, FOMO, is a direct manifestation of loss aversion, as it's driven by the fear of losing out on an experience or opportunity, rather than the pure joy of gaining something. This innate tendency makes us risk-averse when it comes to potential gains, preferring a sure gain over a potentially larger but uncertain one, but paradoxically risk-seeking when it comes to potential losses, willing to take big gambles to avoid a certain loss. The consequences of loss aversion are pervasive and dramatically impact our daily lives, often without us realizing it. In finance, it explains why investors hold on to losing stocks for too long, hoping they'll rebound, rather than cutting their losses. The pain of realizing a loss outweighs the rational decision to sell. Marketers leverage loss aversion by framing offers in terms of what you'll lose if you don't act. Don't miss out on this limited time offer. Or, if you don't sign up now, you'll lose access to exclusive content. Insurance companies thrive on loss aversion, as people are willing to pay premiums to avoid the potential large loss of an unforeseen event. In personal decision-making, it can lead to status quo bias, where we prefer to stick with our current situation rather than change, even if a change might be beneficial, because the potential for loss in the new situation looms larger than the potential for gain. It explains why we cling to old habits, even unhealthy ones, because the effort of changing a perceived loss of comfort or routine feels more significant than the long-term health benefits of perceived gain. To apply this insight and navigate the powerful pull of loss aversion, first, cultivate framing awareness. Recognize how information is presented to you. If something is framed in terms of potential loss, pause and reframe it in terms of potential gain. For example, instead of, "You'll lose $50 if you don't sign up," think, "You could gain $50 if you make a different choice." Second, establish a reference point shift. Consciously change your mental reference point when evaluating decisions. Instead of focusing on what you might lose from your current state, consider what you might gain from a new state, or what you'd lose by not taking action. For instance, when considering a career change. Focus on the opportunities gained rather than the comfort of the current job lost. Third, embrace a growth mindset. Understand that some losses are necessary for growth. Taking a risk often involves the potential for a setback, but avoiding all setbacks also means avoiding all significant progress. Finally, practice pre-mortems in decision-making before making a significant choice. Imagine it has failed and brainstorm all the reasons why. This helps you identify potential losses beforehand and mitigate them, making the actual decision less susceptible to the fear of loss. The powerful takeaway from understanding loss aversion is that our emotional responses to gains and losses are not symmetrical. Losses hit us harder. By becoming aware of this deeply ingrained bias, you can make more rational decisions, resist manipulative framing, and overcome the inertia that often keeps us stuck in less than optimal situations. This insight empowers you to approach risks more strategically, embrace change with greater courage, and ultimately, prioritize long-term growth and well-being over the immediate discomfort of potential setbacks. It's about shifting from a defensive mindset to one of mindful opportunity. Have you ever found yourself unable to stop thinking about a task you started but didn't finish? Perhaps it's an email you drafted but never sent, a book you began but didn't complete, or a project you started at work that remains on your to-do list. That nagging feeling, the persistent mental loop of an uncompleted item, often feels like a broken record in your mind, demanding your attention and refusing to fade into the background. It's a curious psychological phenomenon that highlights how our brains manage, or sometimes mismanage, our mental workload, keeping certain things stubbornly in our consciousness. This persistent mental nudge for uncompleted tasks is known as the Zeigarnik Effect. It describes our tendency to remember unfinished or interrupted tasks better than completed ones. The concept was named after Soviet psychologist Bluma Zeigarnik, who, while observing waiters in a bustling Viennese restaurant, noticed they only remembered orders that were still in progress. Once an order was delivered and paid for, it seemed to vanish from their memory. This led her to conduct experiments that confirmed our brains have a special hold on tasks that haven't reached completion, keeping them more readily accessible in our working memory. The mechanism behind the Zeigarnik effect is believed to be rooted in our brain's inherent drive towards goal completion. When we initiate a task, our cognitive system creates a specific tension system, or task-specific tension, associated with that goal. This tension acts as a mental alert, keeping the task active and salient in our minds. Once the task is completed, this tension is released, and the information is effectively filed away, becoming less accessible for immediate recall. However, if the task is interrupted or left unfinished, the tension remains, constantly nudging the task back into our awareness. It's like an open tab in your mental browser that you can't quite close until the work is done. This explains why an idea for a project might pop into your head at 3 a.m. Your brain is still trying to solve that open mental loop. The consequences of the Zeigarnik effect are a double-edged sword. On one hand, it can be a powerful motivator. The nagging feeling of an unfinished task can push us to complete it, making it a valuable tool for productivity and overcoming procrastination. This is why breaking large goals into smaller, unfinished subtasks can sometimes help maintain momentum. On the other hand, it can contribute to mental clutter, stress, and overwhelm. If you have too many unfinished tasks, your brain can become burdened with a multitude of open loops, leading to scattered focus, anxiety, and difficulty relaxing. It's like having dozens of open tabs on your computer, slowing everything down. This can impact sleep, concentration, and overall mental well-being, turning a helpful cognitive mechanism into a source of chronic mental fatigue. To effectively apply this insight and harness the Zeigarnik effect for your benefit, first, learn to leverage it for motivation. If you're struggling to start a task, just begin it. Do a small part, even if it's just outlining or writing a single paragraph. By initiating the task, you create that tension system that will make it harder for your brain to ignore, often prompting you to return and finish it. Second, for managing mental clutter, practice the brain dump technique or externalization. If your mind is racing with unfinished thoughts and tasks, write them down. The act of externalizing these thoughts, even if you don't act on them immediately, can create a sense of completion for your brain, reducing the tension and freeing up mental space. This is why keeping a thorough to-do list can be so effective for managing stress. Third, when you feel overwhelmed, employ strategic interruptions. If you're working on a complex task, consciously break it up. Finish one subcomponent, then take a short break, rather than working until total exhaustion. This allows the tension for the next subcomponent to build, pulling you back efficiently. Finally, practice mindful closure. At the end of your workday, or before bed, take a moment to review what's completed and what's still open. For open items, quickly outline the next step you'll take. This helps your brain feel a sense of control and reduces the nagging feeling. The powerful takeaway from understanding the Zeigarnik effect is that your brain doesn't like loose ends. It has a built-in system for remembering what's incomplete. By consciously managing your unfinished tasks, both by strategically starting them and by externalizing them, you can transform this cognitive quirk from a source of stress into a powerful tool for productivity and mental clarity. This insight empowers you to work with your brain's natural tendencies, reducing mental clutter and fostering a sense of accomplishment, even amidst complex and ongoing projects. It's about optimizing your mental resources and finding peace in the midst of your daily endeavors. Have you ever had a brilliant idea for a long-term goal, like starting a fitness routine, learning a new language, or saving for retirement, and felt genuinely excited about it, only to find yourself repeatedly putting it off for something less important, like browse social media or watching another episode? It's a common human paradox. We understand the value of future rewards, yet we often prioritize immediate gratification, even if it undermines our larger aspirations. This gap between our intentions and our actions, this persistent delay in initiating beneficial tasks, is a source of frustration for many, leaving us wondering why future us seems to make such bad decisions. This pervasive and often self-sabotaging behavior is known as procrastination, and at its core lies a psychological phenomenon called temporal discounting, also known as delay discounting. Temporal discounting refers to the tendency for people to devalue rewards that are expected to be received in the future compared to those that are available immediately. The further off a reward is in time, the less value it holds for us. It's not simply about patience. It's a hardwired preference for the now over the later, making that piece of cake today seem far more appealing than the vague promise of better health months down the line. The mechanism behind procrastination, fueled by temporal discounting, is rooted in our brain's reward system and its ancient evolutionary drives. Our brains, particularly the limbic system, which deals with emotion and reward, are powerfully attracted to immediate pleasure and quick relief from discomfort. Dopamine, the feel-good neurotransmitter, plays a crucial role here. Immediate rewards trigger a stronger dopamine response than delayed ones. Completing a small, immediate task provides a quick hit of dopamine, whereas the satisfaction from a long-term goal is abstract and far off. Imagine a psychological tug-of-war on one side, the primitive brain craving instant gratification, and on the other, the more evolved prefrontal cortex attempting to plan for the future. The immediate reward often wins because it offers a concrete, tangible benefit right now, outweighing the discounted, uncertain value of a future gain. This preference for immediate rewards is not unique to humans. It's observed across the animal kingdom. The consequences of procrastination driven by temporal discounting are vast and detrimental to personal growth and achievement. Academically, it leads to cramming and poorer grades. Professionally, it results in missed deadlines, increased stress, and missed opportunities for advancement. Financially, it can derail savings plans and lead to mounting debt. Health-wise, it prevents us from exercising, eating well, or seeking timely medical care. The cumulative effect is a pervasive sense of guilt, regret, and a feeling of being constantly behind. It creates a self-reinforcing cycle. The discomfort of a pending task leads to seeking immediate relief procrastination, which in turn increases the discomfort and makes the task even harder to face, further solidifying the habit of delay. This constant deferral of beneficial actions prevents us from reaching our full potential and living a life aligned with our true values. To powerfully combat procrastination and rewire your brain's preference for instant gratification, several strategies can be employed. First, implement temptation bundling. Pair a task you tend to procrastinate on with an activity you genuinely enjoy. For example, only allow yourself to listen to your favorite podcast while doing chores, or only watch your favorite show while on the treadmill. This provides an immediate, desirable reward for engaging in the less appealing activity. Second, practice future self-alignment. Make the future reward more tangible and emotionally salient. Use visualization. Picture yourself healthy, successful, or fluent in that new language. Write a letter to your future self, or find ways to connect with that future version of you, making the delayed reward feel closer and more valuable. Third, employ pre-commitment strategies. Remove the option to procrastinate. Pay for a gym membership in advance. Set up automatic savings transfers. Or tell a trusted friend your deadline so you have external accountability. Fourth, break down large tasks into tiny, immediate steps. Instead of write a report, make the first step, open the document, and write one sentence. The smaller the step, the less daunting it feels, reducing the perceived immediate cost and making it easier to start. Finally, embrace the 2-minute rule. If a task takes less than 2 minutes, do it immediately. This leverages the desire for completion and prevents small tasks from becoming large, overwhelming mental burdens. The profound takeaway from understanding procrastination through the lens of temporal discounting is that our struggle isn't a moral failing. It's a battle against our brain's natural preference for immediate rewards. By consciously manipulating this preference, making delayed rewards feel closer and immediate tasks feel less daunting, you can fundamentally shift your behavior. This insight empowers you to bridge the gap between intention and action, transforming yourself from someone perpetually putting things off to someone consistently working towards their highest aspirations, ultimately blossoming into your fullest potential. Have you ever witnessed a public emergency? Perhaps someone needing help, a minor accident, or a disturbance, and noticed that despite many people being present, no one seemed to step forward to assist. It's a baffling and often heartbreaking observation. The more people there are, the less likely any individual seems to be to intervene. This phenomenon challenges our intuitive belief that safety lies in numbers, revealing instead a darker side of group psychology, where collective responsibility can ironically lead to individual inaction. We often wonder, why didn't someone do something, without realizing that our own presence and the presence of others might be the very reason no one did. This counterintuitive and often tragic phenomenon is known as the bystander effect. It states that individuals are less likely to offer help to a victim when other people are present. The probability of help is inversely related to the number of bystanders. The classic example often cited is the murder of Kitty Genovese in 1964, where numerous witnesses reportedly failed to intervene or call the police, sparking extensive research into the social psychological concept. Psychologists Bedtime and John Darley were pioneers in studying this effect, demonstrating in various experiments how the presence of others diffuses individual responsibility. The mechanism behind the bystander effect is primarily driven by two key psychological processes: diffusion of responsibility and pluralistic ignorance. Diffusion of responsibility occurs when a person is less likely to take responsibility for action or inaction when others are present. In a group, the burden of intervention is spread across all individuals, making each person feel less personally responsible. Someone else will surely do it, is the unconscious thought. Pluralistic ignorance, on the other hand, describes a situation where individuals incorrectly assume that everyone else is interpreting a situation in a particular way, when in fact, they are not. In an emergency, people often look to others for cues on how to react. If everyone else appears calm or uncertain, individuals assume that the situation isn't actually an emergency, leading to inaction. If no one else is panicking, maybe it's not that serious. Both factors contribute to a chilling collective paralysis, where inaction becomes the default group norm. The consequences of the bystander effect are dire, ranging from minor inconveniences to life-threatening situations. In everyday life, it might mean someone struggling with heavy bags gets no help, or a lost child goes unnoticed for longer. In more serious scenarios, it can lead to tragic outcomes, where individuals in distress are ignored, and emergencies escalate simply because no single person feels the personal imperative to act. It impacts not only physical safety but also social issues, like cyberbullying, where multiple bystanders witness harassment online but fail to intervene. It also affects reporting of misconduct in organizations, where the presence of many colleagues can reduce the likelihood of anyone speaking up. Understanding this bias is crucial because it highlights a fundamental flaw in our intuitive understanding of group dynamics and human compassion. To apply this critical insight and ensure you act when help is needed, or to elicit help when you are the one in need, several strategies are vital. First, when you are a bystander, consciously counteract diffusion of responsibility by taking personal initiative. Ask yourself, if I don't act, who will? Make a deliberate decision to be the one who steps forward. Second, break the spell of pluralistic ignorance by acting decisively and making your concern visible. If If you see something, say something. Your reaction can be the cue that others need to realize the gravity of the situation. Third, if you are in need of help, be specific and direct when appealing to others. Don't just shout, "Help," instead. Make eye contact with a single person. Point to them and say, "You in the blue shirt? Please call 911. This assigns clear responsibility and reduces ambiguity. Fourth, for minor situations, practice proactive micro-interventions. Even a small gesture, like asking, "Are you okay?" to someone who stumbles, can break the bystander effect and signal to others that help might be needed. Finally, educate others about the bystander effect. Awareness alone can significantly reduce its power. The powerful takeaway from understanding the bystander effect is that our innate desire to conform or defer responsibility in a group can override our fundamental human inclination to help. By recognizing the psychological forces at play, diffusion of responsibility and pluralistic ignorance, you empower yourself to be an active, decisive intervener rather than a passive bystander. This insight transforms your perception of collective action, urging you to take individual ownership in moments of crisis and encouraging you to be the catalyst for positive intervention, fostering a more compassionate and responsible community. Have you ever walked into a restaurant with an overwhelmingly large menu, or tried to pick a new streaming service from dozens of options, and instead of feeling excited, you felt paralyzed? Perhaps you spent so much time deliberating that you ended up choosing nothing, or later regretted your choice, wondering if you missed out on something better. It seems counterintuitive. More choices should lead to more satisfaction. Yet often, an abundance of options leads to indecision, anxiety, and even dissatisfaction. This perplexing experience highlights a significant truth about our cognitive limits and the hidden costs of excessive freedom. This phenomenon is known as choice overload, or the paradox of choice. It describes how having too many choices can lead to negative psychological outcomes, including decision paralysis, decreased satisfaction with the chosen option, and increased regret. While a moderate number of choices is generally perceived as good, giving us a sense of freedom and control, there's a tipping point where too much choice becomes detrimental. Psychologist Barry Schwartz popularized this concept, arguing that modern society, with its ever-increasing array of options, often leaves us less, not more, happy and fulfilled. The mechanism behind choice overload is rooted in our cognitive architecture and the way our brains process information. When faced with a small number of options, our brains can efficiently compare and contrast them to find the optimal fit. However, as the number of choices increases, the cognitive load rapidly escalates. It becomes harder to process all the information, compare all the pros and cons, and be confident in our selection. This leads to decision paralysis, where the sheer effort of choosing prevents any decision from being made. Furthermore, an abundance of options raises our expectations. We assume that with so many choices, there must be a perfect option out there, leading to increased pressure to make the absolute best selection. This contributes to regret and dissatisfaction, as we constantly compare our chosen option to the tempting, unchosen alternatives, leading to what-if scenarios and a heightened sense of opportunity cost. We also experience escalation of commitment. The more effort we put into choosing, the more we feel invested, and the more regret we feel if the choice isn't perfect. The consequences of choice overload are widespread, impacting our purchasing habits, career paths, personal relationships, and overall well-being. Consumers might abandon their shopping carts online if faced with too many product variations. Employees might struggle with selecting from numerous retirement plans, leading to inaction. In relationships, the vast dating pool presented by apps can lead to a constant search for an even better partner, preventing deep commitment. It contributes to feelings of overwhelm in everyday tasks, from picking a movie to watching to deciding what to eat. This constant mental effort of evaluating endless options drains our cognitive resources, leading to decision fatigue and reduced overall satisfaction with life. Even when objectively we have more freedom. To powerfully apply this insight and navigate the modern world of abundant choices, several strategies are essential. First, practice curation and simplification. Actively reduce the number of choices you consider. For example, instead of browse every streaming service, pick one or two for the evening. If faced with an overwhelming menu, ask the waiter for their top 3 recommendations. This externalizes the filtering process. Second, embrace satisficing over maximizing. Instead of trying to find the absolute best option maximizing, aim for an option that is good enough, satisficing. Recognize that perfect is the enemy of good, and that the diminishing returns of endlessly searching for the optimal choice often lead to more stress than satisfaction. Third, establish personal heuristics or rules of thumb. Create simple decision-making rules for common choices. For instance, I always buy brand X for this product. Or, I'll spend no more than 10 minutes choosing what to watch. Fourth, understand the value of constraints. Sometimes, having fewer options or imposing self-imposed limitations can actually free you. Setting a budget, for example, immediately reduces the number of spending choices, simplifying decisions. The powerful takeaway from understanding choice overload is that while freedom of choice is valuable, an excessive abundance of options can paradoxically diminish our happiness, efficiency, and well-being. By consciously simplifying our choices, prioritizing good enough over perfect, and setting personal boundaries, you can reduce decision fatigue and reclaim mental clarity. This insight empowers you to navigate the complexities of modern life with greater ease, make more satisfying decisions, and ultimately find greater contentment by recognizing that sometimes less truly is more. Have you ever achieved a significant milestone graduating with honors, landing a dream job, receiving an award, or successfully completing a major project, and instead of basking in the glow of your accomplishment, you felt a gnawing doubt? Perhaps you worried that it was just a fluke, that you simply got lucky, or that you somehow fooled everyone into believing you're more competent than you truly are. This persistent inner voice, telling you that you're an inadequate fraud despite compelling evidence of your capabilities, is a quiet but powerful tormentor for many highly successful individuals. It creates a disconnect between objective reality and subjective self-perception, holding you back from truly owning your achievements. This widespread psychological phenomenon is known as imposter syndrome. It's the internal experience of believing that you are not as competent as others perceive you to be, despite external evidence of their accomplishments. Individuals with imposter syndrome remain convinced that they are intellectual frauds and that they will soon be found out. It's not a mental illness, but rather a pattern of thinking that can lead to anxiety, self-doubt, and even burnout. First identified by psychologists, Pauline Rose Clance and Suzanne Imes in the 1970s. It was initially thought to apply primarily to high-achieving women, but research has since shown it affects people of all genders, backgrounds, and professions. The mechanism behind imposter syndrome is a complex interplay of cognitive biases, personality traits, and early life experiences. Perfectionism often plays a significant role. Those with imposter syndrome set impossibly high standards for themselves, and anything less than perfect is deemed a failure, fueling the belief that they are not good enough. They may attribute their successes to external factors like luck, charm, or timing. I was just in the right place at the right time, rather than to their own hard work or intelligence. Conversely, any minor mistake is seen as definitive proof of their inadequacy. The fundamental attribution error, attributing personal success to external factors while attributing failures to internal ones, and confirmation bias. Seeking out evidence that confirms their self-doubt contributes significantly. Furthermore, a fear of failure combined with a fear of success can create a paralyzing cycle. The perceived gap between their internal feeling of inadequacy and external validation grows, leading to anxiety about being exposed as a fraud. The consequences of imposter syndrome can be debilitating. Despite the individual's outward success, it can lead to chronic anxiety and stress, as individuals live in constant fear of being discovered. It can manifest as overworking, as they feel the need to put in excessive effort to compensate for their perceived deficiencies. Paradoxically, it can also lead to underachieving, as the fear of failure or exposure might prevent them from taking on new challenges, pursuing promotions, or sharing their ideas. This cycle of self-doubt can hinder career progression, impact mental health, and prevent individuals from fully enjoying their successes or celebrating their hard-earned achievements. It erodes self-esteem and makes it difficult to form genuine connections, as the individual fears that true vulnerability would reveal their supposed inadequacy. To powerfully combat imposter syndrome and reclaim ownership of your achievements, several strategies are crucial. First, normalize the experience. Understand that you are not alone. Many highly capable and successful individuals experience these feelings. Simply knowing it has a name and that others share it can reduce its power. Second, reframe your thoughts. When you catch yourself thinking, "I just got lucky," consciously challenge that thought. Instead, list the specific actions, skills, and effort you invested that contributed to your success. Create a success journal where you log accomplishments and the effort behind them. Third, share your feelings with trusted individuals. Talking to a mentor, friend, or therapist who understands can provide external validation and help you gain perspective. Often, hearing your doubts articulated makes them seem less overwhelming. Fourth, focus on growth, not perfection. Shift your internal metric from flawless performance to continuous learning and improvement. Embrace mistakes as learning opportunities rather than proof of inadequacy. Finally, decouple self-worth from achievement. Recognize that your inherent value as a person is not dependent on your accomplishments. Success is an outcome, not your identity. The powerful takeaway from understanding imposter syndrome is that it is a common, though often hidden, internal struggle that undermines a person's ability to internalize their own success. By recognizing its patterns, challenging its deceptive narratives, and deliberately reframing your achievements, you can begin to dismantle its hold. This insight empowers you to align your self-perception with objective reality, allowing you to truly own your accomplishments, embrace your competence, and step fully into your power without the shadow of self-doubt, ultimately fostering genuine personal blossoming and confidence. Have you ever celebrated a great personal victory? Perhaps you aced a challenging exam or flawlessly executed a complex project and immediately attributed it to your own intelligence, hard work, or unique talent. Conversely, when something goes wrong, you fail an exam, or a project doesn't go as planned, do you tend to blame external factors like an unfair test, insufficient resources, or unforeseen circumstances? It's a common, almost automatic, mental maneuver, taking credit for our successes while deflecting blame for our failures. This convenient cognitive bias allows us to maintain a positive self-image, but it can also prevent us from learning from mistakes and understanding the true drivers of our outcomes. This pervasive cognitive bias is known as the self-serving bias. It describes our tendency to attribute positive events to our own character, internal attributions, and negative events to external factors, external attributions. When we succeed, we quickly claim, "I did that." But when we fail, the narrative shifts to, "It wasn't my fault, the situation was against me." This bias serves as a powerful psychological protector, shielding our self-esteem and maintaining a favorable view of ourselves. But it often distorts our perception of reality and hinders personal growth. The mechanism behind the self-serving bias is rooted in both motivational and cognitive factors. From a motivational perspective, it's about self-enhancement. We want to feel good about ourselves and protect our self-esteem. Attributing successes to our internal qualities boosts our confidence, while attributing failures to external forces prevents feelings of shame or inadequacy. It's a fundamental drive to see ourselves in a positive light. Cognitively, it relates to informational processing. When we succeed, the link between our efforts and the positive outcome is often clear and easily available in our minds. When we fail, however, our minds might actively search for external excuses or environmental factors that could explain the negative outcome, making those external factors more salient. It's also linked to the fundamental attribution error we discussed earlier, but specifically applied to self versus others. We are more generous in our situational attributions for ourselves, especially when things go wrong. The consequences of the self-serving bias are significant, impacting our ability to learn, our relationships, and our overall effectiveness. While it offers a short-term boost to self-esteem, in the long run, it can impede personal growth. If you constantly blame external factors for your failures, you miss opportunities to identify your own shortcomings, learn from mistakes, and develop resilience. In teams or organizations, it can lead to a lack of accountability, as individuals and groups resist taking responsibility for poor performance, instead pointing fingers at outside forces. This can stifle improvement and create a culture of blame. In relationships, it can lead to friction and resentment. If partners are quick to take credit for positive outcomes, but deflect blame for negative ones, it prevents constructive problem solving and fosters an imbalanced sense of responsibility. It can also lead to overconfidence and unrealistic expectations, as a person consistently attributes success to their inherent brilliance without acknowledging luck or external support. To powerfully apply this insight and ensure a more balanced and accurate self-assessment, several strategies are crucial. First, cultivate radical self-honesty. When faced with a success, acknowledge your effort and skill, but also consider what external factors or support systems contributed. Conversely, when faced with a failure, consciously challenge the urge to immediately externalize blame. Ask yourself, what role did my actions, decisions, or lack of effort play in this outcome? This requires courage, but is essential for learning. Second, practice objective evidence gathering. Instead of relying solely on your subjective interpretation, seek out objective data or feedback from others, particularly when evaluating failures. For example, if a project failed, conduct a thorough post-mortem to identify all contributing factors, both internal and external. Third, adopt a growth mindset, seeing failures not as definitive judgments of your character, but as valuable learning opportunities. Reframe. I failed to. I learned X from this experience. Finally, engage in empathetic perspective-taking. When observing others' failures, actively resist the self-serving bias by considering the internal struggles or efforts they might have put in, just as you would for your own successes. The powerful takeaway from understanding the self-serving bias is that while it protects our ego, it often blinds us to uncomfortable truths that are essential for growth. By consciously challenging our natural inclination to take all credit and deflect all blame, we can foster a more accurate self-assessment, learn more effectively from our experiences, and build genuine resilience. This insight empowers you to move beyond superficial self-protection towards authentic self-awareness, leading to continuous improvement, stronger relationships, and a more profound understanding of the complex interplay of internal and external forces in your life. We've journeyed through the intricate landscapes of the human mind, peeling back layers to reveal the hidden forces that subtly, yet profoundly, shape our every thought, feeling, and action. From the mind's relentless pursuit of consistency in cognitive dissonance to the subtle sway of the first piece of information in anchoring bias, and from the compelling pull of immediate gratification over future rewards and temporal discounting to the surprisingly powerful lure of the uncompleted task in the Zeigarnik Effect. Each insight has offered a unique window into your inner operating system. We've unmasked the biases that color our perceptions of others, like the fundamental attribution error, and those that cloud our self-perception, such as the spotlight effect and imposter syndrome. We've also explored the group dynamics that can lead to inaction, like the bystander effect, and the overwhelming nature of too much choice. Finally, we uncovered the convenient mental gymnastics of the self-serving bias, which protects our ego but can hinder our growth. These 12 deep insights are not merely academic concepts. They are practical lenses through which to view the tapestry of human behavior, empowering you to navigate life with greater clarity, empathy, and intention. Recognizing cognitive dissonance allows you to question your own rationalizations and make more aligned choices. Understanding the fundamental attribution error fosters greater compassion and less judgment towards others. Becoming aware of confirmation bias liberates you from mental echo chambers, opening your mind to diverse perspectives. The spotlight effect dissolves unnecessary self-consciousness, inviting you to be more authentic. Anchoring bias equips you to make more informed decisions, especially in negotiations. Loss aversion helps you understand your motivations and take calculated risks. The Zeigarnik Effect becomes a tool for productivity rather than mental clutter. Understanding temporal discounting empowers you to overcome procrastination and achieve long-term goals. The bystander effect calls you to courageously step forward when others hesitate. Choice overload encourages you to simplify and find contentment in less. Imposter syndrome, once identified, can be challenged, allowing you to own your achievements. And the self-serving bias encourages true self-awareness and accountability. The true power of this knowledge lies not just in understanding these phenomena in isolation, but in seeing how they intertwine, forming the intricate blueprint of human behavior. It's about recognizing that you are not simply a rational actor, but a being influenced by deeply ingrained psychological tendencies, many of which operate beneath your conscious radar. This recognition is not a limitation. It is liberation. It's the first step towards taking conscious control, towards becoming the architect of your own responses, rather than a mere reactor to internal and external forces. This journey of self-understanding is continuous. As you move forward, I encourage you to carry these insights with you. Observe yourself, observe others, and ask yourself, is this cognitive dissonance at play? Am I falling prey to the spotlight effect? How is loss aversion influencing my decision? By consistently applying these mental models, you will refine your perceptions, deepen your empathy, and cultivate a wisdom that transcends superficial appearances. This profound self-awareness is the bedrock of personal growth, allowing you to make more deliberate choices, build stronger relationships, and navigate life's challenges with resilience and grace. It's a gentle awakening to the magnificent complexity of your own being, nurturing your journey of personal blossoming and guiding you towards a richer, more meaningful existence. Embrace this knowledge and truly revolutionize your self-understanding. Now, as we gently bring this exploration to a close, take a moment to simply breathe and absorb the profound insights we've uncovered together. This isn't just about gaining knowledge. It's about integrating it into the very fabric of who you are, allowing these truths to ripple through your everyday actions and interactions. Feel the quiet power that comes from understanding the hidden currents that shape your own mind and the minds of those around you. Let go of any pressure to instantly transform. Instead, allow a sense of gentle curiosity to take root. Every observation you make, every subtle shift in your perception, is a step forward on this path of blossoming. You are now equipped with a deeper lens, a more compassionate gaze, and the profound realization that much of what makes us human is both beautifully complex and wonderfully understandable. Carry this newfound wisdom with grace and let it illuminate your journey ahead.